I wanted a place for people to receive authentic guidance and practical ways to awaken. Thought-provoking, paradigm-shifting, and empowering. This is about expanding our human consciousness to create a wave of new possibilities. I'm Dr. Theresa Bullard, and this is Quantum Minds TV. Welcome back to Quantum Minds TV, where we take a deep dive into various perspectives on what it's going to take to create a shift in human consciousness. In this episode, we're continuing the conversation with award-winning author, public speaker, and one of the most influential spiritual leaders, Lynne McTaggart. I saw you shared this video from your intention experiments for peace in the Middle East, and to see the testimonials that the participants from that process were giving, and the amount of emotion, the amount of healing, really core ancestral healing that was happening, was so moving and really compelling, the power of what can be accomplished here. So one of the things that, the process of helping reunite the tribes, right, is something that bringing that unity again, and it's happening through the altruism, right? So kind of getting outside of oneself, getting outside of one's own cultural narrative, getting outside of one's religious narrative, kind of letting go of the the constructs of the old paradigm or the old way of doing things, and really shifting into something that is more universal, right? Our humanity, our love, our, that we are all, here together. We are all on one planet. Like this sort of shift away from separation consciousness towards unity consciousness seems to be kind of at the core of a lot of what you're doing, but in a very, okay, let's start with what people really can feel is within their grasp and their capability to do.
Absolutely. And, it comes back to that scientific story. As I say, what was really interesting to me when writing The Bond was the big disparity between what we've been told we are and who we really are according to the science. And, we have been brought up with an idea that there just isn't enough to go around. So life must proceed through struggle. And if we, there just isn't enough there, so we damn well better get there first. That attitude is infused in us from the time we're little kids, and somebody puts a list up on the blackboard of the kids who did well in math. And if we're down at the bottom, we feel it very acutely. But that sense of competition is ingrained in us from a very young age. And it keeps getting reinforced in every area of our life. So it's very difficult for us to understand life as anything other than I win, you lose. So that has to be changed. And as you say, if you look at the ancients and so many of the more indigenous tribes, they understood much more about connection. In our hearts, we need to give. That's why it not only feels good to do something altruistic, but our body reacts to it better. We are healthier. And a fascinating study I've discovered was examining the immune systems of a group of people who the scientists called the pleasure seekers, people who had all the money in the world and went on all the holidays in the world and had all kinds of material stuff. When they looked at their immune systems, they were terrible. These were people who were perfect candidates for a heart attack, Alzheimer's, diabetes. These guys were going to be dropping like flies. Whereas the other group they studied were a bunch of people who did not have as much materially, but lived a life of service. They had totally robust immune systems. These people were going to live forever. And that spoke hugely to me in basically saying, all the evidence demonstrates that altruism protects us in every way, that we were meant to give. We were meant to belong. We were meant to give. We were meant to take turns. We were meant to be much more connected than we are now and communal. And when we are, it manifests itself in happiness, in robust, good health, et cetera, et cetera. So we are all living not according to the way we were supposed to live, but according to this old and outdated model, scientific model. And that really is, as you say, it has to change.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you know, the idea of competition and survival of the fittest, that is that Darwinian narrative, isn't even the reality of evolution. Evolution, or what you find in nature, is far more cooperation than competition. And some amount of competition is okay when it's, you know, friendly or for sports. You know, it kind of pushes you to go beyond your personal limits and what you thought was your best. You can go, you know, beyond that. But when it becomes the everything, and the survivalism is built around this idea of competition, then it creates a lot of separation. So I agree that mindset is one of the worst things. And it's like we've played it out as far as we can go with it, and now it's gone beyond its usefulness. And therefore, it needs to be eliminated so that we can evolve towards our next level. And it's interesting, so much of what you're saying about the science behind altruism, because in the mystery school tradition that I study with, the Kabbalistic teachings talk about knowledge, understanding, and wisdom as three very different aspects of our growth process, or our ascension process. And, you know, seeking knowledge is one thing, but that's just where we start. And then as you apply the knowledge and you integrate it into life and you test it out in the world, then you refine that knowledge. And at some point you come to this place of, you know it for yourself. You really understand it, right? So you've advanced to understanding. But in order to move beyond understanding into wisdom, you have to serve. And that service always has to be selfless, like altruistic. It's not that you can't receive something from it, but it's not about you, right? So it's for the others. And the energy that flows through us from stepping into service to others, it raises our vibration. It lifts us up from understanding to wisdom. And in the Kabbalistic tradition, wisdom is the closest that we can get to that original source, that oneness, right? So the final step would be unity consciousness. And so it's so interesting what you're sharing here, because it very much relates to those ancient teachings from that Kabbalistic system. But you also see it in the Gnostic system. They talk about Sophia, you know, wisdom, and you know, so this attaining wisdom and then coming towards greater unity as a collective. I mean, those are very high principles of a spiritual level of consciousness. It doesn't have to be about a religious sense, but it is quintessential in the more eternal essence of who we are, and how we do raise up to those higher states that we have access to, but we just haven't given ourselves the ability, because we've been so focused on the individuality versus the collective connections.
And it's so interesting, Theresa, because I see people who come to my work, you know, Power of Eight groups, and originally they want to heal something in themselves. They want to heal a physical ailment. They want to heal a relationship or find a new one. They want to heal their finances or their career, or even find a new life purpose. It's all self-oriented. And what ends up happening, thanks to the power of the group, a small collective, is that they end up serving. And that ends up being, while they do experience lots of miraculous things happening, as one person said to me last year, I now know what love is. I never felt it like this before. And it is not only the love of feeling it from the group and their altruism, but also being able to serve. I have a wonderful example of this in a guy called Wes Chapman. Wes had a really miserable life. He was studying to be a biochemist or possibly a doctor years ago, and was called up in the very last year of the Vietnam War when he was a junior in college at university. So there was no student deferments. He had to leave and he had to serve. And he was right in the front line. And the whole thing was so traumatizing for him that he came back, he dropped out of college, and his life continued on a very great downward spiral. Even when he found the love of his life, his second wife, she did not last long. She got a fast-growing cancer, and he not only lost her, but he lost his house just trying to pay for her medical bills. So by the time I met Wes, when he was 65, he was finding it hard to even get up out of bed in the morning. He had just lost any purpose to life. So he came as a volunteer to a Power of Eight group I was holding outside of Denver. And he wanted to put himself forward because of all of the chronic depression he was suffering from the trauma and original trauma and onward. But there was a woman there with stage 4 cancer, and he felt she had a higher need. So he was just a sender. That night, he goes to bed, and he wakes up the next morning. So he's done his Power of Eight group, he's gone to bed, wakes up the next morning, and he has these extraordinary heightened senses. The next night, he goes to bed, and he notices also he's much more likely to say hi to people and be friendly, etc. Next night, goes to bed, has this amazing dream, almost like a vision, he put it, as he put it. And he said he met his 19-year-old self, the person he left behind at university when he went off to fight at Vietnam. And somehow that person communicated to him, there's still time. Wes essentially was like Scrooge on Christmas morning. Suddenly, he was going from somebody who was avoiding people, he was hugging other people, he was going around, wanting to volunteer to do this and that. He got into writing again, he got into exercising, he became very involved and participatory in his church, and so forth and so on. He was a completely different man. Wow. From doing an intention to send. And that is an example, one time, wow. An example of the power of giving. It's wow. That powerful.
Amazing. Amazing. So I would love to dive in a little bit more with you about some of the other key components or conditions that you think that really make for the most successful impact when it comes to doing intention work for healing or any other, for peace, whatever it may be, because you've really played around a lot with the parameters and kind of different setups of your intention experiments or Power of Eight groups and so forth. Like, what do you think are the most important conditions? Is it the number? Is it the internal state of the person? Is it that they're all achieving a certain type of coherence by doing the same meditation? Like what is and isn't really essential?
Okay. Well, the first thing is just to let you know that the group intention experience is very different from meditation. Mm-hmm. Meditation, when they've done brainwave studies on meditators, they have a certain brainwave signature that is completely the opposite to the brainwave signatures that neuroscientists I've worked with have measured on a study we did of Power of Eight groups. Our brainwave signatures are very similar to a Sufi master during chanting or a Buddhist monk during ecstatic prayer. Studies that have been done on those types of groups, done by the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Andrew Newberg, have shown brainwave signatures almost identical to ours. And they are turning off parts of the self. The parietal lobes that sit back here help us to, navigate through space and say, this is me, this is not me. Those are turned way down. And so are other parts of the brain that make us feel separate, also are involved with worry, doubt, negativity, particularly in the right frontal lobes. All of these dialed way down. So our people are in a state of ecstatic oneness. when they do intention. And it's like a mystical experience. So I think achieving that state of oneness, which happens very rapidly, and the people that we studied were student volunteers who had never even meditated before. So they were total novices. But I think achieving that state of oneness is a secret sauce. What we've found in terms of the techniques are there's a batch of different things. I teach 13 keys to intention mastery, but if I wanted to choose a few, I would say number one, being specific. When we've done intention experiments where we weren't very specific, we didn't get as good results as when we did tell the universe exactly what we want. So number one, that. Number two, a highly focused mind. It's, as I say, it's not a state of calm meditation. It's a highly focused, energized state of mind. Holding the intention all at the same time is key. And a heart state. You know, it's not a mind. It's not a mind state. It's a heart state. It's sending it out with loving intention, and that's another thing that we work on too.
Mm-hmm. Good. So it's not really, you know, when it comes to achieving that sort of unity within the group, it's not so much about them like having to do a particular breathing technique together. And it's more about them getting into the heart, focusing on the intention, and being specific about the intent. And then just, you know, they're out of themselves, and then it just sort of happens through the altruism.
It just sort of happens.
Yeah. Okay.
No, you're absolutely right. It just sort of happens. I mean, the brilliance of it is, you know, a lot of people think they have to really suffer to become enlightened, or they have to have years of, you know, prostration or going into sweat lodges or whatever.
It's another one of those old paradigms, right?
Absolutely. I've got to suffer to become enlightened. But I've never done intention experiments that were more than 10 minutes. And the reason we started doing that was the first experiment I did with University of Arizona. And we were trying to think about how long should we hold this? And we said, well, if people haven't meditated, they probably can't hold a thought for more than 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. So that's how we started. And because we were successful, we carried on. So even Power of 8 groups, it's always just 10 minutes. And people, in our brainwave studies, we found that our student volunteers are novices, total novices, never did this before, never meditated before, reached that state of oneness within the first couple of minutes. Mm-hmm. So it is, we don't do long breathing things. I may have people breathe together for a few sessions, you know, a few seconds, but that's it. That's it. It's that state of holding that thought together and getting into a heart state is what does it. And that highly focused state.
Mm-hmm. And what about, so we're hearing about the senders, right? And the altruistic, and not only are they, you know, easily able to access that state through what you're seeing, but they're having profound experiences, as you've shared. But what about on the receiver end of it? Is there an optimal state for the receiver? Have you seen anything like the nocebo effect, where they don't believe it's going to have an effect and then it gets in the way? Like what are you seeing with the receiver end of it all?
Sure. What I tell the receiver is open up your heart and receive. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. Just receive. In terms of belief, you were asking about what happens if people don't believe. Well, there is some studies showing that healers are more successful when their subjects believe in the healing technique. I've had a few instances where people didn't believe at all. I had one where I gave a talk one time and I put the audience into Power of 8 groups and they did their little things. And we had some amazing healings there. We had a woman who couldn't focus her eyes after a stroke, and she got, you know, she suddenly could afterward. And another woman who couldn't even walk on her knee. She had such bad arthritis, it was wobbly. And she was due to have surgery, and she did a deep squat afterward and was able to cancel her surgery. But there was a woman in the audience, Faith, who didn't have any faith. She didn't believe it at all. She'd been dragged to my talk by one of her friends, and she had a bad back. She was only a sender, but after her Power of 8 group, her pain disappeared. So she was kind of shocked. And we had another kid, Luke, who had tried to commit suicide because he'd broken up with his first serious girlfriend. This was when he was 15. Threw himself off a 40-foot structure onto hard ground, broke every bone in his body, got nerve damage, brain damage, the whole lot. And the doctors didn't think he was going to live. So all of my master class at the time did successive intentions for Luke on several Sundays. And we kept seeing big improvements in his healing after that. He got out of the hospital in record time. That might have been due to us, might have been due to good doctoring. Certainly, he seemed to respond to our intentions, but it had nothing to do with belief. And by the way, he's a perfectly healthy, I think he's about 20 now, perfectly healthy now. But it had nothing to do with belief because, he was 15 years old. And like most adolescents, he thought his parents' belief in the power of intention was pretty stupid. So what we found is, belief seems to help, but it's not a necessary condition.
Mm-hmm. So you think just opening up the heart and being willing to receive is all that's really needed for the optimal state for a receiver?
Well, I mean, in Luke's case, I don't even think he opened up his heart to receive. I think he tolerated it. His parents told him, "We're going to do this for you. Is that okay?" And he said, "Yeah." So so maybe something else is at work here.
Interesting. So do you think that there's have you seen much of a difference when it comes to the number of people? I know you've said that you've had big groups, you've had small groups. I know you've also said your power of eight isn't necessarily a magic number, it's just a number. What is the difference between, for example, an individual person having an intention for themselves and sending it to themselves versus them receiving it, let's say from an individual practitioner, like a healer, like a one-on-one kind of set, versus them receiving from a group kind of a setting?
Okay, well, there are a lot of variables in there. First of all, sending it to yourself can work if you are certain techniques that I know work better than others. Some of the things that I mentioned, and there are numerous other things too that seem to aid intention. A group definitely works. An individual practitioner, that a lot of that depends on their skill and their knowledge and their words and intention. Depending on all of that, they can heal. If they have more success and more experience in doing intention than, say, the person themselves that they're trying to heal, then they probably will have more success. What I have found over and over again is that the group seems to supersize it. But what doesn't seem to be evident is size. That supersizing is in relation to the size of the group. I think all you need is a group. It doesn't have to be a particular size. I have seen powerful effects with a group of 8. I have seen powerful effects on those seeds we talked about, and they were independent of the size of the group. We were getting pretty much the same results, more or less, with every size group. And we had every different kind of size group, from 800 to 300 to 100 to thousands, et cetera, et cetera. And we were getting similar results all the time. So that told me size didn't seem to matter. We got better results with one group, and they were all a group of experienced healers. So they were used to using healing intentions. So size might not matter, but experience did.
So then that would also then say if a group has been working together for an extended period of time and they've come to know each other well, that there's a likelihood of them being more effective as well. Is that something?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, the group has become connected, and connection, we find even when people just hold hands, their breathing starts synchronizing, their heart rate and brainwaves start synchronizing. So when people are used to working together, they get closer and closer. Their bodies operate as, they start operating as a big superorganism. And I think that, that does assist in the intention process. They also get used to achieving that state of oneness, which I think is one of the big elements of the big secret sauce of group intention work.
Mm-hmm. So they seem to be able to establish that coherence and then that resonant effect of the amplification or the supersizing of the effect faster and easier the more they work together. Do you think then that, I mean, you've said, okay, from 1,000 people to a power of 8 group, there's not necessarily the massive effect, but what about when you have a smaller number, like 2? There's that old quote, when 2 or more are gathered in my name. Do you think that 2 is enough to create that supersizing effect versus just, like 8? Where do you think the minimum number is in a group intention?
Well, I think it depends on how connected the group is, and whether or not the 2 come from a bigger group. We had a situation where one of my masterclass members took her daughter, who was in one of the Paralympics in Europe. So the mother and daughter were traveling together, but the mother hadn't even bought plane tickets. She just trusted the process. And 2 of the women who are part of her group kept doing intention for her through the whole thing, that she would get rides to the event, that she would get special tickets at special discounts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She had the most magical trip with her daughter, and everything fell into place. I mean, just extraordinarily. That may have had to do with that very powerful duo who were doing intention for her. Usually what I say is 5 or more is a group for people who aren't used to it. And I would say more than 12 to 15, it starts getting a little unwieldy. So I tend to say 8 is essentially a Goldilocks figure. It's not too big, it's not too little, and that's why it's optimum. But it doesn't have to be 8. It just has to be a group and people who are working together, who get used to working together, which is one reason why in my masterclass, I run it for a whole year, because I put people into groups and I have them work together for a whole year, because I know that's where the magic ultimately is.
What other evolution do you see those people who are part of those master groups going through the process for a year together? What other kinds of shifts and transformations happen within those members of those groups?
Unbelievable, everything. I've seen, first of all, amazing physical healings, people who had years of depression and found out the cause of it and healed that. People who had chronic fatigue and couldn't even get out of bed and healed that. People who had leukemia or cancer, it got healed. I've seen people who were down to the last 200 pounds suddenly get windfalls or a grant of some sort. I've seen people who were in debt suddenly get some sort of rebate from the bank that was never announced before, they didn't expect, that paid off their debt. I've seen people, I love this story of this woman who was wanted to have love. She wanted to have a relationship. So she did an intention for that with her group. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, a boyfriend of hers from 35 years ago calls her. Now, this is lockdown. He's in the UK. She's in Australia. He calls her. They start communicating. They start connecting. Upshot is he moves to Australia. They're together now. So I've seen relationships get created. I've seen new careers get formed. I've seen lots of people find their life purpose. So all kinds of things get change in their lives. I've found equal amounts of healing of health and healing of lives.
And clearly there's also internal shifts that happen within these people. I mean, you shared some of them feeling love, what it really means to love. Like they start coming out of their shell again. They come out of their depression. They start becoming more altruistic in their way of being. So the inner shifts are happening, I would imagine, in addition to the outer shifts. And how much sustainability do we see in these shifts that are happening for people? Do they continue years
Oh,
into
I
the
think
future?
I have Power of Eight groups who've been meeting for years. That's why I say I have a little army of change makers. These people, a lot of them stay together. A huge number of groups continue to meet. They have experienced love and connection. I mean, I think of Andrea, who was a quiet little person who didn't feel she was worthy of having an intention done for her. She was happy to be a giver, but wasn't used to receiving. And suddenly she started realizing that when she spoke, everyone listened and people wanted to give her an intention. And so suddenly she discovered herself and her own power. That happens. We get people who suddenly recognize the extraordinary power of giving to other people. And so this is a extraordinarily transformative mindset.
So if we can maybe just summarize a few things. So the idea of service and altruism, like really stepping into truly giving for another's benefit rather than what you can necessarily get out of it for yourself. So that service or that altruism is a major key. The clear focus, the clear and specific focus of the intention to really be able to harness and direct. It seems that having a clear image of the recipient or the location or what you're sending the energy towards seems to be really important. The heart state, right? So focus mind, but open heart, really sending the love from the heart. And the group resonance, the amplified field that happens when the group really, hits that state of unity together. These seem to be the major keys.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything?
No, those are some of the majors. As I said, there are 13 keys to
Yeah.
intention mastery, aside from group, how to run a group, et cetera, et cetera. But those are a few of the ones to touch on. And, the thing is about group effects is it's about meeting regularly, being together. And doing, people will try it once or twice. No, nothing worked for me. I mean, I've seen many, 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 many hundreds and hundreds of instances of people who were healed for the first time, like Wes, after one 10-minute intention. Other people, it's with the group. As they grow with the group, then their intentions really start working for them, particularly when the group is holding it. So it's, there's some technique involved. We have to relearn how to do things, and we certainly have to unlearn what we usually think, which is what's in it for me.
Yeah, and that's something that I see as well in the work that I do with people. It's very much about helping them create a new foundation in their life, and that foundation is the base upon which we stand on a day-to-day basis, whether it's our attitudes, our behaviors, our habits, our emotional nature, and when we want to change that foundation so that we can build from a base that will help us create a new kind of life or a new kind of world, we have to repeat, right? The repetition is a really important part of weaving a new way in at a subconscious level, in a embodied way, making it something that becomes more second nature versus it's just this thing I do on a rare occasion, or I tried it once or twice and it did or didn't work. But it's making it a way of life, I think, is a really important key as well. And especially if we want to create a sustainable shift in human consciousness. So I'm wondering, as maybe a final question, is, if we want to create a sustainable shift at a mass level on this planet, there is the ground up stuff, right? The grassroots, what we can do in small groups and spreading that out into our communities. But what would it really take to make it happen where we can really get to that point where we see it going from the small percentage of people doing it to it's becoming the norm, the new norm, the new way in our world at a larger scale?
If you look at a lot of the major movements, let's just take Gandhi and India. What it started with was a small group. and him handing a spinning wheel to tiny communities, because he felt if they were self-sustaining by having a little industry, a spinning wheel for weaving, they would be able to successfully separate from Britain and British colonialism. That started with a small group, and also he taught some of these groups, nonviolence, nonviolent revolution, essentially, nonviolent protest. And that became a revolution. Martin Luther King, the same thing. The Prague Spring, that started with one person saying it was unfair that those communists stopped some rock band. It became intolerable that the communists stopped some little rock band from performing. They felt that was too far. And then people just stopped they stopped conforming and going along with things. Any society operates because of our tacit agreement. We all agree that we're going to allow all of this. We all agree we're going to allow this government. We all agree we're going to allow a government in America. Suppose we don't. Suppose we don't. And suppose we all decide we're not going to buy aspirin tomorrow. And the share price for aspirin absolutely collapses. We have that amount of power, but we don't recognize it. We can change things. What I feel is that we cannot change it from a top-down situation. We are under a lot of corporate tyranny at the time. Now we're under a lot of corruption, unimaginable corruption, particularly in the US, but lots of other places around the world. And so starting at the bottom with grassroots movements is, in my view, the only way to go. And that creates more and more a wave of change that becomes a tidal wave eventually and changes the system. But it has to come from ground up.
Mm-hmm. I'm 100% with
you. And
you.
as you say, it has to start with a change of heart.
Right.
A change of heart, a change of relating, a change of seeing, a change of way of doing things. And when we do, and when we can operate according to a much more holistic scientific story, we will start to change things.
And how far do you think we are from that? I mean, I know that we started off that there's a lot of chaos in the world, but there's also a lot of people waking up and starting to recognize their power. I think what you're saying is like, we have to recognize our own power and step into that empowerment to become that change from the ground up. But how far do you think we are from reaching that kind of a tipping point?
I think people are at the point now of recognizing that. Implementing it in their lives is a very different thing. We're talking about, people have to change their own story. And they're maybe recognizing the change of story, but they have to implement that. It has to be implemented in their relationships. I know plenty of people in the New Age movement who are still I win, you lose. So we have to learn quite a bit about a new way to be. And we also have to change a lot of our societal structures, because nothing will change if we have things that still operate the way it does now, where there is, unimaginable corruption, corporate corruption, where there is unimaginable political gridlock and apathy and also corruption. So all of those big societal structures have to change. And that really has to start with small groups starting to live a little bit differently. And I think, and also recognizing their own need for a change of heart. But we've all been indoctrinated. So we have to start learning all of that, changing the way we are. And then we have to start doing.
Yeah, so relearning, reprogramming, but it's not just enough to know it or to have the concept of it or to have even just the intention of it without taking the action, without embodying it, without applying it on a regular basis. So that's how we make those shifts from the ground up. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Now, is there anything else that you would like to say? Any final words, anything you'd like to share with people about how they can learn more about your work or how to get involved with your intention groups?
Thank you. Yes, they can get hold of me at lynnmctaggart.com, and you'll find out all about how to join the 8 Revolution. You can also find out about all of my forthcoming courses. I run my year-long Power of 8 Intention Masterclass. I've got retreats where we use intention to heal people's lives and heal their past, and intention essentials and many, many other courses. Just check out everything that I'm doing on lynnmctaggart.com.
Okay, wonderful. Well, that brings us to the end of this conscious conversation with Lynne McTaggart. Lynne, thank you so much for joining me and being my distinguished guest today. I loved your deep insights and wisdom that you've had to share, and our messages and the way in which we're approaching this collective shift is very, very similar. Different approaches, but very similar themes. And so I love sharing this kind of a unified message with everyone. So I really want to thank you for your time today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Theresa.
We hope you've taken some golden nuggets from this session, and most importantly, that you will take the knowledge gained here and apply it into your life so that you can receive the full benefits from it. Now, as always, thank you for tuning in to Quantum Minds TV. And if you enjoyed it, please do rate, review, and subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and or Spotify. And if you'd like to be the first to get full access to each conscious conversation as soon as it's available, you may register at quantummindstv.com with your name and email. It's completely free to register, and it'll provide you with a secret link where you can watch all of the conversations as soon as they're available at your leisure. And you'll also get many free gifts and other great content by subscribing to my newsletter. Until next time, I'm Dr. Theresa Bullard, and this is Quantum Minds TV.
This conscious conversation was created, produced, and recorded by Dr. Theresa Bullard and edited by Verse Content and Depth Perception Films. The theme music and intro videography were created by Tin Mountain and Eden Mode Productions. Quantum Minds TV is a product of the Quantum Learning Academy.